Dear, dear guests, welcome to the UAE Pavilion at COP28. We would like to bring to your attention that the following session will be broadcasted via live stream on our channels. We seek your kind support and mindfulness during the presentations. Thank you for understanding and enjoy the session.
ضيوفنا الأعزاء، مرحبا بكم في جناح الإمارات في مؤتمر المناخ كوب 28. نود أن نلفت انتباهكم إلى أنه سيتم بث الجلسة التالية مباشرة على قنواتنا. نتطلع لدعمكم الكريم خلال العروض ونعرب عن امتناننا لتفهمك وتعاونك.
Yeah, you can. Please do. Please join us. Yeah. Welcome. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. We are honored to be hosting you today at COP28 on Water Day in the UAE Pavilion. According to certain measures, up to 4 billion people currently experience water scarcity at least once a month per year. Global water scarcity is a complex and challenge that requires an urgent, comprehensive, coordinated response from the international community. The causes of water scarcity are multifaceted and include population growth, infrastructure challenges, environmental pollution, and impacts of climate change. The MENA region is the most water-stressed region on Earth, but all countries, even those with an abundant, consistent supply of water, are becoming increasingly vulnerable to the direct and indirect effects of global water scarcity. If we fail to take action, the medium and long-term implications of water scarcity will be immense, especially on vulnerable communities around the world, with effects including loss of life, food insecurity, the involuntary mass migration, and geopolitical instability. The UN estimates that water stress could lead up to the displacement of up to 700 million people by 2030 if we don't make the right decisions. Unfortunately, however, there is no simple solution to solving the crisis, and this is why we require a more holistic approach. Today, we are joined by a distinguished group of experts from across the globe to discuss the issue from a range of perspectives. Henk Ovnek is Commissioner for the Global Commission on Economics of Water. He was previously the Water Envoy for the Netherlands and held the position of Sherpa of the UN Water Conference, which took place last March. Sultan Rahmanzoda is Special Envoy for the President of Tajikistan for Water, as well as the COP28 Water Champion. I'd like to apologize on behalf of Dr. Agnes Kalbata. She has other commitments during COP that we apologize for her absence today. Our panelists bring a wealth of knowledge that will undoubtedly enrich today's water discussion. We are excited to gain insights from your experience, so thank you for joining us. Let's get started. It's generally agreed that a more coordinated international response is the only way to shape and advance global efforts to address water scarcity. I would like to start off by approaching the issue from a perspective of policy, partnerships, and practice. Sultan, you are the water envoy of the Republic of Tajikistan, a country at the forefront of the International Water Action Agenda. Could you start off by outlining some of the specific challenges that your country is facing in relation to the threat of water scarcity? Then could you tell us about your role as the COP28 Water Champion?
Thank you very much. Tajikistan basically is a not water scarce country. We are a water abundant country providing 60% of water resources of Central Asia region. But even 5 years ago, if you talked about the water scarce or water deficit or drought in Europe, nobody could believe. But last year, Europe met it basically. The same, I think that none of the countries are guaranteed that after 20 years or 30 years, they will become water scarce here, especially if you're analyzing the situation. I'm chairing also the executive committee of the International Fund for Saving the RLC. It's a regional organization of 5 countries in Central Asia. And the example of Central Asia shows that the region, the countries will be becoming the water scarce region. The figure shows basically in 1960s, the water availability per capita in our region was more than 8,000 cubic meter per capita per year. Nowadays, after 40, 50 years, the water availability is less than 2,000. So It reduced 4 times, and we twice faster than the global trends in this regard. So, I mean that when regionally, globally, water scarcity is becoming very challenging issue, and especially because of the climate change impact, but also because of the growing demand for water resources. And again, I mean, the water availability per capita in Central Asia is a good example of that. So that's why we appreciate basically the initiative by UAE now to making the focus, a greater focus and the pledge, importantly, on the water scarcity issues. So Minister of Foreign Affairs during the Water Action Summit on 2nd of December made a pledge that UAE is willing to allocate 150 million USD addressing water scarcity issues. And on the same day, we had a pledge from MDBs, although it is all the sectors, not only water scarcity, but I mean, again, the water action is really needed, and we have to accelerate our actions in this regard. So the MDBs, the president of the Islamic Development Bank, made a statement on behalf of all MDBs, highlighting a number of points and making the pledge that the MDBs are going to increase the investment in water sector and doubling the number of peoples receiving the benefits from the water projects from the MDBs in the next 3 years. And he mentioned also that the current trend, the current investment from MDBs in water sector in total, it's around 10 billion USD per year, benefiting, I think, 79 or 89 million people around here. And he mentioned also that with this trend and with the dynamics we have, in 2030, the demand for investment in water sector will be 6.7 trillion USD, while in 2050, it will be more than 22 trillion USD. So this is basically the figures, the huge amounts of financial resources, and he clearly mentioned that it is much beyond the capacities and the resources of MDBs and even the governments. That's why we need basically the support, or we need to involve the private sector in this area too. So I think that this kind of pledge made by UAE is really welcomed by all of us. So the UN 2023 Water Conference, we honored with the Netherlands to co-host in March here, once again highlighted the importance of water. And taking this opportunity, I would like also to thank UAE government for inviting Tajikistan and the Netherlands to co-lead the water work stream of COP28. And thanks to support of your government and our collaborative work, we have very bold agenda, a bold position of water in the COP28 agenda. So I think that as a water champion of COP28, we have the significant progress in terms of the having water in climate action. That's perfect, but we need, I highlighted in number of meetings, that we need also stronger voice and position of water in the negotiated outcome document, since water really plays an important role in achieving the climate resiliency.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And that reaches to the second question, Aaron. There has been discussions around creating a Paris moment for water, with outcomes critical for water as the Paris Agreement has been for climate action. How can we facilitate this, and can we legislate it? And what has been achieved so far, and what do you think the path forward is?
There was a meeting just, I think before that meeting, there was a side event, and I mentioned that just analyzing the situation, we can just divide the time in terms of water before the UN 2023 Water Conference and after that. Yeah. Unfortunately, having such a great role in the sustainable development, water was not so visible in the agenda of other events before the UN 2023 Water Conference. So after that, we have been witnessing the really great positive movements around water, having the UNJ resolution on water. So the conference in New York was the second in the history of the UN and the first after almost half century, after 46 years. What does it mean? What was not the priority in the development agenda.
Yeah.
But right after that, what we have, the UNJ resolution, which highlights the regularity of the UN water meetings in 2026 and 2028. I mentioned also that water now, one of the 8 global challenges, main priorities for the World Bank to address it in the next future. So the resolution I mentioned and the bold position of water in COP28 agenda, in climate agenda, and France announced the willingness to host One Planet Summit dedicated to water. So we have many other things, and Karin, I would like to thank CV also providing a very nice platform in Stockholm this year, bringing together the governments, but also mostly NGOs and other different stakeholders to highlight basically what has happened in New York and to discuss how to move forward. I think that to have Paris moment, halfly, we did it in New York, basically, having the water action agenda, more than 800 commitments registered in that, the willingness of the country, but unfortunately, that was not negotiated outcome document. So Paris Agreement, we know it's a negotiated outcome document. We hope, we pray, and we invite all the countries, especially member states and other stakeholders, to unite our efforts to have the really Paris moment for water in nearest future. Without water, there is no future. We shouldn't forget about this.
Indeed, well said. Henk, you have had a long and distinguished career in a number of fields related to water. Your focus is on water economics, namely the value, use, and governance of water for the common good. Many water organizations that we've met are expressing the importance of your work with the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. Can you tell us more broadly about your role and the work that you're doing?
Thank you so much, and thank you, Sultan, for making so clear not only the importance of water, but the importance of, one, the collaboration between Tajikistan and the Netherlands and the wider membership, all these stepping stone moments that led to the water conference and that we now found here, the leadership of the UAE in this COP, but also in the lead up to the COP and with your pledge and the 150 million and your leadership here in the region and the world, there is a way ahead. So, no pun intended, but the glass with me is always overflowing, but even in a dry region, you could say the glass is more than half full. After close to 9 years, I stepped down as water envoy for the Kingdom of the Netherlands in September this year. But I'm still leading the work on the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, an independent commission that was set up by the Kingdom of the Netherlands as a third pillar after the Stern review on the economics of climate and the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity. And why this economic framing is so critically important? We talked about this at the conference too. For the first time in human history, we are crossing boundaries in a way that is unprecedented. And the water cycle, the cycle we so depend on, everything, our health, our food, our energy, our cities, us, human beings, kids and grown-ups and elderly, communities across the world, is at risk. We lose fresh water at a rate unprecedented. But we built an economic system on the assumption that it is always there. So we give away over 400 billion of subsidies directly related to agriculture, close to $1 trillion of those subsidies when we think about food security. But those subsidies are aimed at producing food, also with an objective of eradicating hunger, but they're built on the assumption that there's water to provide that food. So those billions are actually driving water insecurity. Yeah. So the understanding of these relationships is key. Second, this water cycle being dented, not yet broken, causes massive amounts of climate change events. We power up our hydrological systems, and therefore these extreme events only become more extreme. Longer droughts, more intense, heat waves, we have sea storms and surges across the world, atmospheric rivers crossing continents. Yeah. So we thought in the past that water was very local, that you could manage it with a community, a little canal. And it turns out that beyond a rivershed, beyond an aquifer, this water cycle is global. So we have to acknowledge it as a global common good and address it also in the context of governance, what Sultan said, making sure that we protect it, that we agree on as a world that without that water cycle, without that freshwater availability, we're lost. We're losing it, we're polluting it, our aquifers are beyond tipping points, we lose our glaciers because of climate change, deforestation and bad planning. IPCC report of 2019, Climate Change and Land, explains clearly how we're destroying that natural capital. And that natural capital is not validated and evaluated. There's no value on that. And that undermines the security of health, food, energy, and beyond. So I think that economic thinking is key. It, of course, has to drive action. Because we can focus on this magnitude of the challenge, it will paralyze us. It will paralyze politicians who make decisions and investors who have to put their money in. It will paralyze communities at the front line of climate change impact. So we have to provide solutions. Solutions on the ground, community-led, indigenously led, but also governance-backed, government-backed, private sector-backed with the investment. Like Sultan also said, coming from the UAE, coming from the World Bank, coming from all our other partners to ensure that we present the world with alternatives. Because we are not inspired by the things that make the world fall apart, right? You know, you wake up in the morning and then if you dream, you had a nightmare. But we can be inspired by those alternatives. And if those alternatives help us to understand what we have to change in our policies, in our regulations, in the way we fund and finance water security initiatives, then those alternatives can become mainstreamed and therefore scaled and replicated. But right now, these alternatives don't fit within the system. So that means, again, no pun intended, drops on a hot plate. And then we will lose out. So I think the focus of the Commission is one, the assessment of the challenge of the problem and making sure that we understand the economy through a water lens as well as water through an economic lens. Second, look at what needs to be done in the context of governance and finance and policy, but also what can be done when we think about innovations and partnerships and challenges to put out. And of course, lastly, in the context of what came out of the UN Water Conference, yes, we have to make sure that on that global stage, water is addressed and gets a home and an agreement moving forward to ensure that water security for all is seen as something global, that we have to take care of us together, and that next UN Water Conference, perhaps already in 2026, shows a glimpse of that agreement to make sure that it is baked into our climate negotiations, embedded into our investment strategies, but also seen as a great opportunity for private sector and countries. Applaud again the UAE in putting water, it's Water and Food Day. I started this day with an amazing round table on water and food with fantastic examples on how countries, private sector, financiers are already taking action. You put a spotlight on this. With the pledge of 150 million, you elevate water to a level where we can see scale and replication. And with your ambitions of moving this forward in the future, I can only be hopeful.
Thank you so much. Going back to your work at the Global Commission, we'd like to learn more on how is the Commission seeking to see tangible change in the world in terms of understanding the value of water?
So we came up with the first call to action in March, and it has 7 points. One, we have to really acknowledge that this global water cycle is a global common good. A common good that we all have to care for and make sure that we can. So we have to instrumentalize that global common good. Second, we have to look at the future. We say mission-oriented. We should not go step by step, The SDGs, in a way, are a mission-oriented agenda, but they're taken apart, and therefore a more comprehensive approach is lacking. While at the UN conference, it was very clear, only with a very comprehensive, long-term approach, mission-oriented, we can get there. And there's always this example, how do we got to the moon? But, you know, it got us a lot of other things, and it's exactly this mission orientation on water security that can help. Third, we do have to look at the cost and price and value of water in a far broader sense. Right now, the most vulnerable pay 5 to 50 times too much or more than ones that can just turn on the tap. And that water is not guaranteed in quality even. So it's harming the people, it's harming people, it's harming women and girls that walk the wells. They pay for water, sometimes with their lives. And we have to get to a cost of water that is an equalizer, not a one that right now, because it's not valued and not priced, driving inequality. I talked about the subsidies. There's 700 billion out there, 400 to agriculture, 300 to water availability. That is driving water insecurity, taking exactly that fresh water away for the ones that need it most. 5, we say just water partnerships. Partnerships that really build in equity and inclusivity, that inspire governance and governance capacity, but also can help progress. 6, innovations. And of course, there are no silver bullets when it comes to water. We know. But innovations help. They can catalyze excitement. They can attract funding. They show, as I said before, there's alternative. Yeah. And lastly, the Commission says, yes, because it is of global concern, because it is a global common good, we have to address it at the UN level. We need to make sure that there is whatever in that context can be arranged, capacity, an organization, and an agreement, but also a process moving forward, that we will never, ever leave water alone. The work of the Commission is, you could say, halfway. Our research is firmed up. We want to present it in September, the full report, perhaps at the One Water Summit. We're in discussion with France and Kazakhstan on that, or somewhere along that. But then the work is only beginning. The Commission wants to identify transition and transition pathways that are most critical. And this could be on subsidies and incentives, and then we could focus on food, but it could also be other things. Climate, for instance, biodiversity. And identifying, not too many, because then we will fail, but some of these priorities to drive transitions, to help the world transform for water security for all.
Thank you so much for those insights. We know that despite the threat, global water scarcity does not currently attract the same levels of public attention and financial investment as other comparable risks such as pandemics and climate change. With a multifaceted problem like water scarcity, adopting system-based thinking becomes essential to cultivate holistic solutions. These were just some of the issues that were outlined in the discussion paper on the topic of water scarcity that was published by the UAE Foreign Affairs, in September on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The findings of this discussion paper have informed the UAE's decision to pledge for the $150 million in funding to accelerate water solutions to water scarcity, and to create a new non-profit initiative focused on addressing water scarcity. And while these are important steps in finding new and innovative solutions to the challenge, there are other numerous ways in which we can address the global issue of water scarcity. Hank, there are concerns that water scarcity challenge simply isn't attracting enough finance to properly address the problem. How can innovation and solution drivers improve the bankability of projects designed to combat water-related challenges?
Yeah, I think, and this is perhaps more generic, but it is for what is scarcity for sure. Our world is becoming scarcer and scarcer, even in the Netherlands, which is a low-lying delta. And in the partnership with Tajikistan, we also said where the Netherlands stopped, Tajikistan started. We only are, our highest point is 300 meters. In Tajikistan, you can climb mountains. close to 8,000 meters with a massive inspirational environment. But scarcity in the Netherlands is also a truth. So even in situations, these extremes only become more extremes. Attracting funding for innovations, you put out capital, 150 million. De-risking is one of those issues that really needs to happen. Second, create a safe environment. Innovations don't happen in an environment where there's no trust, because innovations always go against existing principles, mechanisms, and interests, because they're novel. So they challenge the existing environment. Yeah. And if that environment is not safe where these innovations can flourish, forget about it. But that safety has to be coupled with partnerships that are able to invest in that. We set up a program in Asia where we used water as a lever, but brought everybody from the community organization all the way to international investment banks together, so we can provide an alternative that works. Implementation is third. Innovations on paper don't convince financiers, but innovations in practice that are supported work. And then perhaps the last part, things are consistency, continuity, and commitment. Because an innovation needs support. You have to implement it, test, fail, implement it again. So backing that support on the long run, continue to attract capital, and bring this into a wider context of changing policies and regulations and frameworks are of critical importance. And I think that environment and that opportunity to bring that to scale are key. That is for water scarcity, but that is, of course, broader in the context of innovations, how it works. I think you are in a water scarce region. What works in the UAE can be scaled up to the world. So you can be the source, even when you are lacking water, of innovations that can help trickle across the world, driving water scarcity into an opportunity of becoming far more water resilient.
Following up, what are some innovative data-driven projects that you've seen that have earned the attention they rightly deserve?
Yeah, good question. So one of the initiatives that actually came out of the UN Water Conference in the context of the call of the Secretary General saying every citizen by 2027 has to have the data and be capacitated to be prepared for the disasters, the extremes that are coming, this early warning for all. And WMO was asked to come up with a plan. And the government of the Netherlands said, that is amazing to have all the data, but if I don't know what to do with it as a community on the front line of climate change, where am I? So we set up a program, Water at the Heart of Climate Action, where we brought together WMO, because they are the data provider and have the capacity financially to provide that data, UNDRR, who does the disaster risk reduction frameworks and helps with the Sendai framework, inform national governments on how to perform, IFRC, Red Cross, Red Crescent Society, to work across the world in countries, and the Red Cross Climate Center to work off the ground, and local communities together in an initiative where the data that comes from satellites actually has the capacity to inform local community what to do. It's a program, I think we provided 70 million for it at first tranche. We work now in 4 countries in Africa, but such a program which focuses on the communities at the front line of climate change, to capacitate them with the data that's coming in to ensure that they can take action, are those innovations that really help the lives and livelihoods of the most vulnerable.
Thank you so much. Sultan, how can we build a more enabling environment or a more effective action agenda to accelerate the development of water scarcity solutions?
I think that we need a number of actions in this regard. So the nature of water, we know that more than 300 river basins, they have transboundary nature. So we need the water diplomacy in our relationship between the countries. But to be honest, sometimes I'm thinking that the water diplomacy even is needed inside of one country, because the competition between the sectors, even within the one country, because of the climate change, is increasing. So we need this kind of the good relationship, better understanding the right people on board for the discussion. The second moment, of course, is infrastructure. We were talking a lot about the innovation, about the governance, about the capacity building. Yes, we are right. We need all of them. But at the same time, because of the growing demand for water, because of population growth, economic development, we need also infrastructure. One example, in 2010, I had been appointed the first Deputy Minister of Land Reclamation and Water Resources in Tajikistan. And the first instruction we received from the government to visit the site being irrigated with pump stations. It is around 10,000 hectares. When we arrived to the site, I was shocked. A number of villages, they looked like the bombed. There were no roofs, destroyed the walls, the dried lands, gardens. Why it happened? Because we had the pump stations, 5-stage pump stations irrigated those areas. And those pump stations were out of operation for 5 years or more. Maybe unfortunately, we had the civil war at that time, and we couldn't manage that, basically. And there was no people, the migration. The people moved out from that region. So within 1 year, we rehabilitated those pump stations there, and 10,000 people come back to that area. And this morning, I talked with our Minister of Agriculture, who was a part of the discussion of the Ministerial Roundtable on the water resilient climate food system. So he mentioned it's like paradise now. The people are there, they are happy. You again see that everything is green, clean, and a very developing area. So the second moment, the infrastructure is really needed also to sustainably manage our water resources. In the case, again, I was part of our team to make the feasibility study of the Rogun project in Tajikistan. It's one of the biggest hydropower plant with 3,600 megawatt capacity. So it's a multiple solution. So building the hydropower plants, we will receive clean and green energy. The second moment is a sustainable management of water resources, because it will be the big dam there, reducing the floods, the risks of the floods, mitigating the risks of the droughts, and also it helps us in terms of the reduction of the CO2. It's mitigation, because in the case of the Rogun project, it was calculated by the World Bank experts that if the same amount of energy will be producing by Rogun hydropower plant in Tajikistan, in case of producing this electricity in coal-fired electricity power plant, so the amount of the CO2 emissions annually will be around 14.7 million ton per year. In case of the using oil, it will be 10 million, and in case of the natural gas, it is 7. So it is really multiple decision, but since it will be in transboundary rivers, the sustainability issues, both in terms of the environment, but also in terms of the impacts to the downstream, as it requires cooperation. Cooperation between the countries, partnership between the countries, and following the sustainability standards. And I would like to highlight that Tajikistan is the first country in the world receiving the golden standard of hydropower sustainability. It was just last year in Bali during the International Hydropower Association Congress, and the willingness of Tajikistan to follow in this process with these standards to build the hydropower plants and to develop not only for the benefit of Tajikistan, but for the benefits of all the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have come to an end of today's session. It has been a very promising and insightful conversation we had today. I would therefore like to extend my gratitude to our guests today for their experience and their time and their long-standing commitment to addressing water scarcity. In order to that, I believe that we're going to need more conversations like this one that bring together people from different disciplines, sectors, and from different parts of the world. This has been a very informative conversation, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much. picture, please.